Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Ritchie. I'm the artistic director here at the Center Theater Group. Thank you for applauding me for knowing my name. Welcome to tonight's event. This is a shared event between Center Theater Group and KPCC. This is the Crawford Family Forum, and tonight's discussion is based around the production of Zoot Suit, which is currently playing on this stage, actually officially opened last night. And we'll talk about the original events that inspired this play, the premiere production in 1978, and this particular revival today. But before we start, show of hands, how many of you have seen this production of Zoot Suit? Good. How many have not seen it? And how many of you are not planning on seeing it at all? Same damn joke every time. Makes me laugh. All right, we're going to get started. I'd like to bring out Oscar Garza from KPCC, who's going to say a few words and then welcome the rest of our guests tonight. Oscar?
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for coming tonight. On behalf of KPCC and In Person, which is our public events department, thank you for coming out and welcome. I'm the senior producer of a daily arts and entertainment show called The Frame. It airs at 3:30 and 7 p.m. every day. Thank you. For those who didn't clap or who that means nothing to you, please check out the show. And just a few housekeeping things before we get started. If you haven't already, out in the lobby we have our mobile recording booth. It's called Big Mike, and we'd love to hear your questions or thoughts about tonight's program or anything else that's meaningful to you as a resident of Southern California. So please help us out with that. After the panel, there's going to be a Q&A period, and there will be a mic set up on one of the aisles, and you can walk up and ask questions of the panel. When you come up, if you would please say your name, where you live, and ask your question, and we ask you to be as concise as possible so we can get to as many questions as possible. We are live streaming this event at kpcc.org and on Facebook Live, and we will also, we're taping the event, and we'll have excerpts of this conversation on The Frame in the near future. While it is radio, you don't have to be quiet, but we do ask that you be respectful in your responses. And as we begin, if the spirit moves you, we invite you to applaud. It always makes for good radio. This may be one of the few times in your theater-going life that you will be allowed to use your phones in your devices. Just please silence them. We also ask that you engage with us on social media. We're using the hashtag Zoot Suit tonight. Photos are okay, but please no flash and no recording, no video and no recording. I want to thank a couple of people. First of all, Michael Ritchie and his tremendous staff for hosting us here tonight. They've been just incredible with us, and also to the communications staff, which has helped us get the word out about this event, and also to John Cohn and the in-person staff at KPCC. If you've never been to a KPCC event, there's a place on our website, kpcc.org, where you can check out all of our events. We have a lot of them at our facility in Pasadena, but we're increasingly out in the city as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to the moderator for tonight. It's John Horn. He's the host of The Frame, our daily entertainment show. John has been an entertainment journalist for many more years than he'd probably care for me to say. But John Horn.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you all for coming out. I want to ask one more question that Michael didn't ask. How many people here were at the 1978 production of Zoot Suit? There you go. That's unbelievable. So we're going to talk about the first and the current productions. I want to bring out the writer and director of Zoot Suit and the founder of El Teatro Campesino, Luis Valdez. You've already met him, but you're going to meet him again, Michael Ritchie. Artistic Director of the Center Theater Group. For those who saw the show in 1978 and saw it again, you might recognize this actress, a member of the original revival cast, Rose Portillo. And the chair of the History Department at Pomona College, Tomás Sandoval. Thank you all for coming out. Luis, this play debuted on this very stage in 1978, but I want to talk about the revival, about the conversations that you had with Michael about bringing it back. Where did they start, and what was the inciting incident?
Of the revival a year ago, more than a year ago, right, Michael? We began to talk. It was time for me to come back to the taper, but especially with this play, you know, because it seemed like the times were headed in the wrong direction. And so...
you knew this a year ago.
I've known it for 50 years. You know? Yeah, the struggle has never ceased. You know, we've been doing Teatro Campesino 52 years, so the struggle continues in the trenches. But the idea of coming back with a renewed, revived Zoot Suit was very attractive on all levels, political, artistic, cultural, personal. And so it is my pleasure, really my honor, to have accepted Michael Ritchie's invitation to bring Zoot Suit back to the taper, back home. And I'm very happy that we did. It's incredible. And with Rose and my brother Daniel, two members of the original cast, as well as new stars like Damian Bashir in the role of El Pachuco, and a whole new generation of actors. My hope is that this production will do for the young cast what the original production did for that young cast, highlighting the talents of Edward James Olmos, Tony Plana, Lupe Ontiveros, Abel Franco, so many people that became icons in their own right.
Michael, why did you think this is the right time to bring this play back?
Well, this is actually the beginning of our 50th anniversary season, so I started thinking about this season probably about 2 years ago and what the frame of it would be. And I knew that part of it should be a look back towards something significant that we had done in our first 50 years. And Zoot Suit kept popping out to me as both a significant play and an incredible moment in theater history. And I also did it somewhat selfishly in that I had never seen the production. And I've told Luis this. I moved to New York in 1979, and I remember walking down Broadway and walking past the Winter Garden Theater and the sign up and the posters up for this show. And I was 20 years old, and I had come from a small New England town. I remember thinking, well, you're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. There's something going on here that's interesting. And I was working a show. And so I never got to see Zoot Suit when it was playing in New York. And of course then came here and kept hearing stories and stories and stories. So it was number one on my list for the 50th anniversary season. And when we met, thankfully, the idea clicked and we were able to bring it to its feet.
Tomás, I want to talk a little bit about the period in which this story is set. There's an interesting documentary that you can find on YouTube about the Zoot Suit riots. It was made for PBS in 2002. And it starts by saying that by 1942, Mexican Americans had come to be considered foreigners in a city that they actually had founded. Can you describe what the political situation was like for Mexican Americans in Los Angeles in the early 1940s?
Well, in many ways, it's a mixed one, right? Depending on who you are. The ethnic Mexican community, the Mexican American community was largely segregated, living inside of different barrios throughout Los Angeles. They were a significant part of the population. There were about 250,000 of them in a city that was about 1.5 million, so about 15% of the overall population. But they were largely marginalized politically and marginalized socially. In as much as they were a big part of the economy, a big part of the workforce, they were sort of off to the sides when it came to politics. They had no political representation at the time. And this generation that's coming of age in the 40s is growing up with a sense of their Americanness, but also a sense of that otherness, that they're a group who are second-class citizens and often getting that kind of treatment in the schools and inside of the labor force and inside of their relationships with the police department.
Luis, you were born in the Central Valley. You were probably a young child when the Zoot Suit riots happened. How did you learn about that point, that moment in U.S. history, and at what point did that story become the inspiration for this show?
In many ways, the subject matter of Zoot Suit has haunted me all my life. I was actually in Los Angeles with my parents in 1943, the summer of the Zoot Suit riots. We had family here. And I remember, I have a memory of Valdez Street pulling a little wooden army truck, you know. But we left. We left because of the violence, and we went back up north to be safe. And but I always knew about Pachucos. I grew up among Pachucos. My cousins were Pachucos. As a matter of fact, I tell the story about Cici, which I'll share with you briefly here. My cousin was Billy Miranda. I dedicated Zoot Suit, the original Zoot Suit, to his memory. And he was a Pachuco back in the 1940s, late 40s, in Delano. And he had a friend, a running partner called Cici. And Cici used to hang out, come over to the house, and short Indian-looking type, you know. And they were Pachucos. To me, they looked like men. They were teenagers. But what happened then is that my cousin Billy met a violent Pachuco's death in 1955, 17 knife wounds to the chest. Cici joined the Navy and went off to fight for his country, and then came back on leave and took his date, who became his wife, to the movies. Now, movie theaters were segregated in the 1940s. I remember that. I lived that. And so he sat in the orchestra section where he wasn't, because he was serving his country. So the usher came, so you got to move. He didn't move. The manager came, you got to move. He wouldn't move. So they brought the police, and they arrested him. They picked him up and took him to the local police station in Delano. And all his friends said, "Wow, Cici's in trouble, man," you know. And so no, after 2 hours of grilling, they released him. There was no law that says you couldn't sit in the middle of the orchestra section in a movie theater. So all his friends were impressed. The next week, they all went to the movies and sat in the middle section. So the Delano Theater was desegregated. And I experienced that, seeing the wave of theaters being desegregated by these teenagers. So years later, I'm heading to Delano to join the farm workers' strike as a volunteer. I became a picket captain. And my mother says, "Oh, you're going to work with Cici." And I said, "Cici? That vato's still around?" And she laughed. And she says, "Mijo, don't you know who Cici is?" I said, "Who is he?" "Cesar Chavez."
Oh,
Never saw that covered. Never saw it covered.
Rose, I want to rewind the clock a little bit to the original production and your first collaboration with Luis. First of all, what was your first encounter with Luis in El Teatro Campesino, and how did you come to be in the show?
Well, my first encounter was actually at Pomona College, where I was a student. And we came to see, you did La Gran Carpa here. And we came to see it, and it changed my life. And just that style of theater and who was being portrayed on the stage. There are times where you don't know what's missing until you see it. And so once I saw it, I went, "Oh, that's my family. Oh my God, someone's telling a story that I never get to tell, that I just live." So we then had an opportunity, it's vague, I'm old now, it's vague. But I know that there was a meeting and I was there and they said, "Who should we bring? We have some money." And I said, "Teatro Campesino." So there were a group of us, and you accepted and came and did another performance, something else. I don't even know the name. But again, I sat there, and my boyfriend at the time just sort of looked at me as all of a sudden I went, "Ah!" And he went, "Oh my God, you're having a moment." So, but it also, it was the perfect timing of Chicanismo really grabbing hold, I think, really grabbing hold. And it was in the colleges now. And it's the right age to be going through identity issue, discovering identity and what that means and who you really are and stuff. And I had some amazing professors, Jose Cuellar now, who's also Dr. Loco. And he's a fabulous musician. And so we didn't meet, but I was responsible for bringing you. And then I graduate, and I am, I decide, okay, I'm going to try this profession. I knew I was going to try the profession, but I'll try the business. And so I was getting work, and I did some things here and there, and I was getting some good work, although I never wore good shoes, and I was always a little dirty, and my hair was straggly. I looked nothing like I looked in life, and in the parts I would be playing. And anyway, I got a call for Zoot Suit, and I went, Zoot Suit? And they went, yeah, Luis Valdez. I went, okay, okay. And so I auditioned a couple of times, several times, because you're very thorough. You were then, you are now. And then there was this moment, I had already been signed to a film. And they called and they said, well, you got the part, but you can't take it. And I said, I beg your pardon? They said, yeah, Luis wants you to play the role of Della, but you already agreed to do this film, and so there's a conflict and you can't. And I went, no, you're getting me out of the film because this is a dream, and you're not stepping on my dream. And they listened to me. It got a little complicated.
But that's a good story.
But
Tomás and Luis, I want to talk a little bit about identity through fashion and what Zoot Suits meant for the people who wore them, and what it meant to lose that fashion, what it meant to have your clothes ripped from your body and burned in the street. How was that identity connected to clothing, and how did it emerge? What were the influences behind it? Tomás, do you want to start, or Luis?
I mean, but it's a complicated question in a way, right? I mean, just to put it in the time of the war, though, we have to realize that this is a time where things like fabric are being rationed off. So a lot of people see something as ostentatious as a zoot suit with so much fabric going on as sort of thumbing their nose at the war, right? And patriotism. At the same time, for that youth, it's very much a suit that's the mark of jazz culture, of a culture that they see themselves being a part of in a way. Sort of distinguishing themselves from an earlier generation of their parents. And this isn't just for Chicano youth and Chicana youth, but African American youth, even white youth. It's in a way their own uniform for their generational popular culture.
Same question? Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole question of clothes is pretty essential, I think, and central to the human experience. Clothes make the man or the woman, for all that case. And certainly the Chicano experience goes way back when two world cultures met. And the New World and the discovery of America by Europeans, and then the adjustment that happened. Aztecs did not wear suits, it was too hot. But then over the years, they began to adopt a more Spanish-looking thing. And so mariachis today, for instance, dress like old Spanish rancheros, that look with the broad hat. And so the dilemma for Chicanos was that they were no longer in Mexico, adjusting or adapting to a Hispanic reality. They were now in the United States. And in a city like Los Angeles, a burgeoning, growing city, they needed an urban style that fit them. And so they went to the most natural place, which is African American culture. African Americans already resolved the issue by inventing the zoot suit on the East Coast to go along with the music, the big band sound, the Savoy Ballroom, everything in Harlem. And that style spread like wildfire across the country, came through El Paso, where we suspect it picked up the name El Pachuco, and landed in Los Angeles, where the young zoot suiters began to dress in a style that they felt was appropriate to come downtown, onto Broadway. But of course, this was a racist, segregated society at the time, and so they condemned the zoot suit as an example of not just outrageousness, but criminality. And
it was actually criminalized after the riots, right?
Absolutely. It was viewed as something that was anti-American because of the war and so forth. But in effect, no one had the prescience to know that World War II was about to happen, not the young guys. They came out of the Depression wanting to express a feeling of sumptuousness and urban sophistication. Mm-hmm. And so the zoot suit became their uniform, became their style. It wasn't dangerous. It was just very stylish. Anybody can look good in a zoot suit. Those drapes are tremendous. And so, unfortunately, it was ostracized and turned into a negative image, which led to the stripping of these young men in the public streets, in the streets of Los Angeles. And if you've ever been to high school, you see strippings in the gym. It's a horrendous, humiliating experience, whoever gets stripped. This was even doubly so because it was in the streets. Nobody was killed in the LA Zoot Suit riots, but people were psychically damaged. Yeah. So that 38 years after the fact, when the Zoot Suit premiered here, There were people that were still bringing their scars and their damaged souls because of what had happened.
It was definitely, if I may, just the, it was about shaming.
Yeah.
It was about killing the spirit. Not, it wasn't about killing the body, but the spirit, which was worse. Yeah? And I think that youth consistently go through that to some degree. It depends on the politics of the time as to the depth of the degree. But it's about identity. And so every youth culture, every generation needs to break free and find their own style, their own way of being and maneuvering through the world. And this was a particularly beautiful one.
It's interesting because the Pachuco style gave way to the lowrider culture of today, and the lowrider culture is not only in Los Angeles, it's now in Japan. You have Japanese young Zoot Suiters, lowriders, aping the style of California Chicanos because they see some meaning in it. You know, it's a global world, a global reality, and that speaks very clearly to me about the lasting impact of this style of dressing.
Luis, your El Teatro Campesino started by performing shows on the back of trucks in the fields in the Central Valley. How did you bring this show to the Mark Taper? That seems like a very big jump for that company.
Well, in 1973, Peter Brook brought his international theater research company to San Juan Bautista to perform, to actually share a workshop for 2 months. 2 of the 3 months that that company spent, which is based in Paris, spent in California and the United States, was in San Juan Bautista with us in our old warehouse. Now, we had been to Europe with the teatro. We went to the Nancy Theater Festival in 1969, became a cause célèbre. We were re-invited again back to Paris and to Western Europe 8 times, 8 national tours. We were famous in Europe before we were famous in the United States. And so Peter Brook, being the most outstanding director that England has produced in modern times, was based in Paris, and he came then to visit me. And he said he wanted to bring his company, and so they did. The summer of '73, they worked out on a Persian carpet. It was amazing. And we had invited guests, artistic directors from all over the country and from state. And that's when I met Gordon. He came to the workshop.
Gordon Davidson.
Gordon Davidson, yes, and he saw our work. And then he invited the Teatro Campesino to perform on the stage one of our seminal pieces, what Rose just mentioned, La Carpa de los Rascuachis, 10 days. We had been here, 4 nights, I think it was 4 nights, 1 weekend, and it sold out. And he was amazed. He said, wow, you got a following. Yes, we do. and so after that, subsequent 3 years later, he invited me then to commissioned me to write a play about Los Angeles history, which became Zoot Suit.
And I would add, not just a following, but a hunger. A hunger, the city had a hunger, and the culture in general, nationally, had a hunger to see their stories represented on this stage.
And I would argue that hunger has not diminished at all. Michael, you just extended the run of Zoot Suit today for another week, is that right?
Yep.
And for those people who have been to this play, the conversations you hear in the lobby of this theater, half of them are in Spanish, which is a beautiful thing to hear. So in terms of attracting a new audience to a new production of an old play, what does that mean in terms of not just what the Taper's doing, but what's happening in theater in Los Angeles and what audiences you can now reach?
Well, I think it's, we have great motivation, and it's part of our mission to tell the stories of our community. Los Angeles County, California, the United States, the world, however you define community. And what I found is that when you tell the stories, they may be occasionally from unique perspectives or cultures, people, ages, political persuasions, sexual identity. And oftentimes the audience comes in, and some of the audience is there to see their story on stage. And other members of the audience are coming expecting to see some other person's story on stage, the other. And I think when it is done well, and this is a perfect example of it, that the story becomes universal. And the experience that the audience has is not only an evening of entertainment or being engaged in a story. I think at its best, it can enlighten people as to the basic common humanity we all have. And there is there is no difference. And anyone, we all want the same thing. We want to love and be loved by our family and friends. We want to be respected by our neighbors. We want a better life for our children. We're all the same. So when you see what at first may be appear to be someone else's story, and then realize it's your story, you've erased a barrier. And I think that certainly happened on this show, and I think we're seeing it more and more in the theater as the years go by.
Tomás, a large part of the staging of Zoot Suit, the taper, involves newspapers that are used as props and yet sets as well. They're torn up and they build furniture out of newspapers. And it really calls to mind, since we live in an era of alternative facts and fake news, what the media's treatment of Mexican Americans was in the 40s, and the false narratives that were put forward by the media at that time, and what they meant and how hard they were to escape.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the ways that, I mean, the play is so present, right? So just timely, even though it's about the 1940s. We get, I mean, the history of this is something as it's depicted largely inside of the play, that Chicano youth, that Pachuco youth are being, what we would say, criminalized. They're being seen as a criminal element and as an internal national threat, right, inside of Los Angeles, which is part of that hysteria that leads to the so-called Zoot Suit riots, which are really servicemen's riots, right, who believe that they're doing their job as military people fighting the internal threat. And that kind of, I mean, salacious coverage that this generation is growing up with. I mean, we can think about the way that frames their own sense of themselves, right? That there are people who are joining, just like some of the defendants in the actual Sleepy Lagoon trial. I mean, joining the military, going off to fight for their own country, seeing themselves as needing to fight for their country, and then at the same time being treated like an internal enemy inside of their own country, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the things about the criminalization of Latino youth is a present reality. Delano, since the grape strike, has built 2 prisons outside of Delano. Massive, horrible-looking institutions right next to the 40 acres that the union developed as their headquarters. All up and down the West Valley of California and into Arizona, there are new prisons that are capitalizing, because they're for-profit prisons, and they're capitalizing on the incarceration of Latino and African-American youth by and large. And that in itself is criminal. That in itself, but it began by the creation of a national stereotype that was great for selling newspapers, but it really misled people as to who these young kids were and what they were trying to do. And there have always been rebellious youth, and they've expressed all the way back to the American Revolution. Those were rebellious youths. The staging, and of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda dramatized it perfectly in Hamilton. But the fact is that this kind of prejudice and ignorance, I call it ignorance, ignores history. And Los Angeles has always been a key and central place, from the pueblo that was here in 1781 to the burgeoning, growing, creative city that it is today and continues to grow. And this is America. And the challenges of this city are the challenges that are facing the nation as a whole. It'll catch up with the Midwest one day, but the fact is that we're facing the need for a new vision of what America is. We need to redefine the American people in all their colors now, in all of their backgrounds. Nobody has to sacrifice anything because another group rises, you know. We are all rising on the same tide. And the fact is that there are people that are throwing that vision away. I grew up cutting out little silhouettes of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, you know, when I was in grammar school. I bought it, man. I believed it. I believed the American dream. I thought it was freedom for everybody. And then I learned along the way that there were glitches. But it doesn't mean that we can't stop struggling for that we mustn't fight. We must fight for that. We must fight for this together, regardless of race, color, and creed.
Luis, the play is based on real-life incidents, but you chose to change the surnames of a couple of principal characters. For example, the play's Henry Reina was originally Henry Levas, and Alice Bloomfield was really Alice McGrath. Why did you change the names, and do you ever meet the families of the real families?
I met the families. The problem with doing something that is historical is that people take it at face value. So, oh, that didn't happen, you know. So it didn't happen. I knew I couldn't. I wasn't there. So how could I exactly like a fly on the wall, tell the story. I took a hint, really, from Inherit the Wind, which was written by Jonathan Lee's father and Jerome Lawrence, Jonathan Lee was our assistant stage manager on the original production. He's now the production chief here at the Taper. And so, and Inherit the Wind took the monkey trial, the Scopes trial, and fictionalized it within limits. That was the first play I was in college. I played the organ grinder, the Italian organ grinder with a little monkey. But the fact, I was 19. It was my first college play. But the fact is that I decided to then fictionalize the Zoot Suit, the Sleepy Lagoon case, to a point where I could begin to deal with it creatively. So Leyva became Reina. He's also a composite figure. There's not all Henry Leyvas. There's also a couple of the other guys in there. But I had to choose. 22 defendants, I chose 4 guys. 4 guys to represent, including Tommy Roberts, in life, Bobby Thompson, who was an Anglo. He was in with the guys. He was in the prison. And I wanted to get the funny guy, and I wanted to get the older guys, so I chose 4 guys. And then I added the Pachucas, not the trio that sings, but the other, Berta, and then eventually Della. These were based on real people, but they weren't the real people, okay? It's a page I have to take for creative license from other playwrights that have paved this road long before me. But I love dealing with history as closely as I can get.
And did you meet any of the real family? I mean, were you able to talk to them?
Absolutely. I met the family. Alice McGrath. I met Carrie McWilliams to begin with. Carrie McWilliams was the chair of the Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee. Yes, one of the greatest sociologists America's ever produced. A line of books that are incredible. North from Mexico, which defined me as a Chicano when I was in college. Brothers Under the Skin, Southern California, Island in the Sun. I recommend their books because they're still current. That's how I learned about the Sleepy Lagoon case from Carrie McWilliams' book. It was my honor to go to New York, to Columbia University, where he was teaching at the time, and to interview him. His wife was trying to get me out, because he was frail. But the fact, he gave me more than 45 minutes. He gave me 2.5 hours, and we talked. And then he led me to Alice McGrath, who then led me to George Shibley. I began to meet the real people, and eventually the family. The family received Alice like an old friend. She opened the doors, and I walked into the Leyva home. I met the parents. The father was dying of cancer, but he was still lively as hell. It was amazing. He wanted to pull out his old tequila bottle right there, The daughter said, no, Papa, you can't. But anyway, I met him, went to his funeral. He died on Father's Day, buried on Father's Day. Actually, his mother, also funeral, Lupe Leyvas, Rudy Leyvas. I met the whole family. And they were here the other night, 53 of them, okay?
Michael, you committed to this revival before the election was held, and I guess we could call it twisted serendipity. There's probably other words we can use to explain what this play looks like in the new era. But as somebody who's presenting the play, how do you think its import has changed since the election?
Well, a lot of people have been asking me over the past week, did you make this decision after the election? And some people have said to me, how lucky are you that this play is playing at this time? And I take a little bit of offense at, how lucky are we that it's playing, that it's so pertinent. But what originally attracted me to the play itself first was, as I said earlier, there was this mythology in the air about this play that I had never seen in person. So there was a selfish reason for producing it, and that I wanted to see it. I was somewhat afraid of or concerned about living up to the mythology, whether or not this production or the play would live up to that. But I read the play 3 or 4 times, and in the play, what I found was that there were many different elements that were very pertinent to today's times. Now, I think any of us that are of any age, I was born in the late 50s, we've seen forward progress in the United States in terms of racial relationships, the women's movement, gay rights. We've all seen a forward movement, but if you'd have to have blinders on to not think that we're nowhere near where we want to be. So the play was very current for me. A year and a half, 2 years ago, in today's environment, under the best of circumstances. Obviously, there was a lot that was said leading up to the election, with the election, and even post-election that made it more pertinent. And if you're in the theater while the play is going on, you can find that the audience is watching a play that is set in 1943, that was written in the late 70s, first performed in 1978, and the words that are being spoken, and some of them are direct from the transcripts. These were words that were spoken back at that time. You can both feel and hear the audience respond as citizens of today, that they react not as if they're watching something with a distance. They are actively involved in what is taking place on the stage because it's taking place in the streets. So I'm not happy that that moment exists. I am happy that the theater does have the opportunity and a place to be part of the public discussion. In fact, the very name of this theater, the Mark Taper Forum, lends itself to a lot of the decisions we make about the shows that we produce here. We want to inspire conversation about the world we live in. So the election did change the framework of it a bit, there's no question, but this play was going to be pertinent no matter what.
Tomás, this is, as Michael said, it's a story set in the 40s, written in the 70s, but it does feel incredibly contemporary. As you think, as a historian, about the issues that the play raises that are still relevant today, what would you put at the top of the list? How is the story from the 40s, written in the 70s, still raising issues that are very much issues today?
Yeah, I mean, I think Luis did this explicitly in the play. It's hard to miss, right? It's an American story. And what he's really doing is trying to write a story of a generation that see themselves as Americans, but also see themselves as proud Mexicans, as proud Mexican Americans. And I think that's the how it speaks to the 70s as well, right? I mean, this was an event in the 70s for Chicano Los Angeles, right? That's a generation who was coming to the theater maybe for the first time to see a play about their tios, about their tias, about their mother and father, right? And to be able to have that sense of pride too, that we are a part of this thing of the arts of the theater, and we are a part of this country, and to have that kind of a story of dignity, really, to represent who your community is, and to valorize the kinds of values that you have. And I think for the present, it's the same sort of thing. I mean, I think it's a little bit kind of interesting too. It's a little more complicated because Los Angeles is very different now. I mean, the Latino population has been recreated in the last 50 years from new immigration from other parts of Latin America, not just Mexico. We have kids, at our college where we work who are not direct descendants of people who were here in the 40s, right? They're people who came in the 80s and 90s. And so for them, it's a way to connect themselves up to a longer history of Mexicans, of Latinos inside of Southern California, inside of the United States.
Rose,
I
go ahead.
feel like in 78, many of us who were on the stage were connected to people who had lived that history. So it was palpable in a different way. And the audience, I remember feeling the audience and seeing, I talked a little bit about shame before and the attempt of the riots to kill the spirit of the Mexican American, of the Mexican, of the Pachuco, of the Zoot Suit, todo eso. And what I felt was that Luis had created an opportunity for a cleansing. And instead of aguitado and with the head bowed low and pull the hat over your head, it suddenly you just watched that Pachuco and you went, okay, move over. I belong. And in the same way that, like, I didn't know what I was missing when I saw La Carpa, you could feel I didn't realize that I'd been hanging my head down. I didn't realize that I had been, now we can use the academic term, I feel it's academic, oppression. I didn't realize, but it's true. I didn't realize I'd been oppressed. I didn't realize all this stuff was going on. And then I see this acknowledgement and celebration. And I am not leaving. I'm not going away. And it happened to the generation that was older than us, that had lived through it, that were like, it was hard for many of them to come into the theater. But the young kids were all into the Zoot Suit style. They were into the style again. Really, you used to do this to your hair and you used to blah, 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 right? So that's what got them in the theater. And then there was this transformation that happened in the moment of the play, which good theater does that. You're experiencing a moment of transformation, and it happened. So then I felt it was really, this whole identity was happening that we were swept up in, and it was about time. This time, I feel that it is more what you're saying. The fabric of Los Angeles is in the room. The fabric of Los Angeles is in the room. And people are acknowledging, this audience seems to acknowledge that history and that legacy has been feeling a vacancy. But they want to share it with their community, and the community is not just the Hispanic community or the Latino community. The community is their neighbors, their friends. It's like Joey says, it's a people's world, they say. It's a people's world. It's about celebrating that and the fact that we learned it the first time around, that universal is about being specific. You have to be specific about the story you're telling. In that specificity, suddenly, I'm not Latino, I'm not Chinese, I'm losing my voice, but suddenly in the specificity, it becomes universal.
Yeah, it's called the universality of the particularity.
Yeah.
That's a line out of the Mao's Little Red Book, believe it or not. Makes me a communist. No, but the thing is that when we set out to promote this 38 years ago, I had this conversation with Gordon and Nancy Hereford, who is here. How were we going to promote this? How were we going to announce this? A new play. And then we decided at the time on a new American play. We wanted people to hear that as a subtitle, Zoot Suit, a new American play. What that has become in the intervening 38 years is a new category in the American theater. We're meeting, the Latino Commons is meeting all over the country. We're having meetings coast to coast to discuss our future. But we decided collectively that Latino doesn't go far enough. Yeah. We're the new American theater. And that speaks not just to people of Hispanic origin or the mixes, the Indígena mixes, but also Filipinos, also Chinese and Korean and Japanese Americans. Anybody that's ever joined the party recently has a place here. And the new American vision includes everybody. And it's starting in the theater. It's here. And in some ways, it started with this last round with Zoot Suit calling itself the New American Play because we wanted to embrace everybody. And we didn't want to exclude ourselves. We wanted to include everybody else. And as a playwright, I continued to write really with fascination about the American experience. I grew up with everybody. Okay, I grew up with Asians. I had a half Japanese, half Mexican friend who inspired my next play. I mean, I've had Jewish girlfriends, I'll be honest, you know.
Long time ago.
No,
long time ago.
That interaction between Anglos and other people, I mean, that's life. You know, that was our growing up. I had to meet people, and the intimate, personal level. And I've never rejected it. I think it's beautiful, you know. And so I reach out to the new American audience, and I want them to be all colors. I hope that they can all look at each other and say, we have something in common. It's this new vision of what the 21st century means in America, but we have to make it real.
Well said. Before we get to audience questions, Rose, I'm going to ask you one last question. That is, from the original production with Danielle playing young lovers to the new revival where you're playing parents, what was it like to come back on stage with Danielle and revisit this play as a performer, outside of the world not changing maybe as much as we all hope, but to step back on stage with Danielle in this play as a performer? What did that mean to you?
I'm the luckiest girl in the world. I mean, I really am. How many artists get to live a full circle? It's just, it is also incredibly surreal. Incredibly surreal. I mean, Luis will go, Hank, get over here. And I go, Danny, oh, no, he's not calling you. He's not calling you. You know, those reflexes are still there. The music for the Sleepy Lagoon starts, and I just go, oh, you know. But I get to be there. You know, it's quite a present. It really is. Yeah.
Well
It's
said.
hard to talk about.
We're going to try to get some audience questions in. I think the microphone is going to be house right. Is that right? There's the lovely microphone friend. Again, we'll take questions, try to make them succinct so we can get to as many as possible. You have to walk up to the microphone because we're recording this. So if you're in the middle of an aisle, just glare at people and they'll get out of the way. Oh, wait, we're going to start back here.
You want
So
the-
come on over to the mic. Yep. Go ahead, right back here.
Alan Friedenthal from Sherman Oaks, and thank you for putting this all together, KPCC and Mr. Ritchie. In 1978, did you break the fourth wall and do the servicemen fight right here on the, I don't know what you call it,
On the
concourse?
mezzanine level, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, because I thought that was very powerful when I saw it two weeks ago.
In 78, you saw it here?
No, I saw it 2 weeks ago.
It comes out, yeah, it comes out onto the, yes, it was, we went out into the audience, and fortunately, Los Angeles audiences were more receptive than New York audiences, because when we were in New York, we did the same thing at the Winter Garden for one preview. Eddie went out into the audience, and somebody tripped him. And he said, I'm not going out there. So we brought the action back on stage. It's just, New York's a little bit tougher, you know what I'm saying?
I think we know that.
But here, I mean, this is where that device was born, right there on that level, and I was happy that we could do it again, because it's really engaging the public, right? You participate then in the discussion.
Go ahead.
Hi, Luis. Josefina
Hi,
López.
Josefina, how
Hola,
are you?
¿cómo estás?
Playwright, Josefina, you know Lopez, please, you know, real women have curves. We're very proud of her. Simply Maria, you're wonderful.
Thank you. So Zoot Suit went on Broadway, but it had a very short run.
Yeah.
And back then, for those of us who followed Zoot Suit, we know why. But do you think it could finally go on Broadway? Do you think there's finally an audience now with Hamilton breaking all the records and box office records? Do you think that Zoot Suit can now be on Broadway? Do you think Chicanos can finally be on Broadway?
I think that there's more awareness, yes, in country, coast to coast now. However, you have to have real deep pockets to go to New York, and mine are a little shallow, But in any case, if there are any angels out there that are willing to transport Zoot Suit to New York and take on the whole country, I'll listen.
So will Michael.
Yeah, we're in show business, okay? This is the show. We need to do business.
Go ahead.
Just want to let you know that I'm one of your biggest fans. I loved La Bamba. It was a defining film in my life. And then, of course...
I love the mariachi outfit, man. Good
Oh, thanks, bro.
All right.
Thanks, I love the jacket. It's a great party favor. It opens discussion, right? You mentioned something about the Californios. Anyways, back to you and your illustrious career. I know for a fact that La Bamba made record profits.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact
Over
that
100 million worldwide.
Boom.
In 87.
Yes. Yeah. And I know for a fact, right? And I know that the soundtrack also made record profits as well.
Also.
Yeah, there was a first
Silver
time.
grammars, platinum, all that thing, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So the question then becomes, Luis, if you are a successful filmmaker, why haven't we seen another film produced by Hollywood, directed by you and written by you?
A good question. It's a long, we don't have the time, man, to discuss this. What it means is that, I mean, at the same time that there are people that applaud the success of a director, like myself, of color, there are those that oppose it. And they're all over Hollywood, The idea is an act of power. And sometimes the power is, I'll break your balls, That's the power. And believe me, I have walked away from projects you never heard of and never saw because of the compromising position the studios or producers put me into. I have experienced everything. Okay, I was going to do Bless Me Ultima, do you remember that? No? And we were in New Mexico, we had the script, we'd worked on it for a couple of years. We were looking for locations in New Mexico. My agent calls, says, come back, something has happened. We were producing it with an independent company called Coralco. I don't know if you know about Coralco. Anyway, Coralco, Jose Menendez and his wife were the principal owners, and the wife particularly was championing Bless Me Ultima. Well, we found out that when we got back, that they had been killed by their children, the Menendez brothers. And so up went, the production company went up in smoke, and so did our project, you know? And I've had a lot of stories like that. I've had ups and downs. But I tell you, it has never kept me from continuing to work. The Teatro Campesino has been alive for over 50 years. My objective is to continue to write. So I have a lot of plays that have not been seen in Los Angeles. We're trying to find a way to get them here. But they seem to be received by audiences, you know? In any case, the struggle continues on many levels, okay? It's not just Hollywood. It's also at the grassroots, man. It's all connected.
We have a social media question from Victor, who is watching on Facebook. Luis, did you have to fight to keep Mexican-American actors on Broadway? Were there any producers who said no?
I didn't get that whole thing.
Did you get any pressure not to cast Mexican-American actors when the show moved to Broadway? And what were producers' positions on how you were casting it?
No, we brought a cast from California. We did cast Puerto Ricans. We cast... See, Latinos are like Asians. You know, you play whatever you're required to do. And also, I mean, so-called white people, they play everything. You know, but the thing is that no, we brought a team from California. We were very happy about that. I think New York wasn't really ready 38 years ago. They were jealous of what was happening in LA. These are two big metropolitan centers. I celebrate New York. I love New York like everybody else. But I love LA. So come on, give us a break. You know, we're two ends of the same stick.
But the wonderful thing that did happen also was that, you know, the show kept running here. So there was an opportunity that this play created through Luis, that there were actors, the full company that stayed here. Some of the originals stayed here, and the rest of us went to New York, and we were able to include actors, New York actors. I mean, it was this wonderful thing. And then for the film also, we were able to do different combinations.
We ran for a year and essentially stopped to make the movie. Okay, we did not close for lack of business. We were running at 95% capacity at the Aquarius when we closed the show.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Next question.
My name's Jeannie Gerard. I work in the UCLA Library in Special Collections.
Oh,
and
good.
I'm proud to say a friend of Alice McGrath's.
Bravo.
So as you know, the papers of the Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee and Carrie McWilliams and Alice McGrath and Guy Endor are all there. Alice told me many times the story of how you found your lifeline for the play at UCLA, and I wondered if you would share that.
Well, Alice took me to the Special Collections Library, and they wheeled out the little wagon with all of the materials, you know, especially with the letters. And we sat at a table and went through Hank's letters, the guys, what they had written, sketches that they had made. Totally touching experience. You know, meeting and working with Alice was one of my life-changing experiences. One, because she was a member of the previous generation, a fighter for social justice from the 30s, and it was my honor to be able to highlight that. But certainly that collection is amazing, you know, what was there, and still is. And I recommend it to anybody who wants to see the thing. Be careful with those letters because they're real. They're written in pencil in some instances. I picked up everything, you know, that I could from those letters. I quoted them verbatim, like I quoted the transcript verbatim. I wrote the summations, okay? I was an English major, what the hell, you know what I'm saying? But I'm also a Chicano, you know, who understands slang, you know? Ese no traes pisto, tengo ganas de ponerme buticrónico. I mean, that's and I learned that in the streets, you know? But in any case, I quoted then from those letters, and in New York, Walter Kerr, the dean of the American Drama Critics, criticized my English. He said, well, he can't help writing bad English because it's his second language, okay? And God damn it, you know, I was a straight A English major. Come on. You know, I was started out in math and physics. Straight A. I mentioned that because I don't look like a math and physics guy, you know? But I love math and I love physics. But then I switched to English because I got tired of people coming up to me and saying, do you speak English? And I thought, sí, como no, cabrón. Yes, I can speak English, you know? So actually, in imitation of my English teacher, Dr. Ed Farrell, who's still alive, he's still my friend. He was maybe 32, 33 when he was my teacher. I was 15. I learned English from him. He was also my speech teacher. I speak like him. Wow. You know, I write like him. He was my inspiration to become a writer. And I've told him so. I've told him so. You know, you inspired me. And he said, well, I learned about Chicanos through you. You know, I mean, wow. It works both ways. But the fact is that English is not my second language. I've been bilingual all my life. My parents were bilingual. So to have the dean of New York critics impose that stereotype on me was infuriating. Okay?
I'll say.
All right.
Next question.
Hi, Luis. I'm Linda Terrazas, originally from East Los Angeles, but I spent many years living in Delano. I wanted to know, what was the reaction when you went on your first tour of colleges along the coast of California? Because my mother, Irene Valdez, was your driver. While she was your driver. And she had many stories to tell me about how crazy you guys were.
Your mom?
Do you remember Irene Valdez, correct?
Oh, my God. Irene?
And Roy, yes, my mother.
Irene was your mom?
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord. Okay.
You guys are a lot of fun.
I loved
fun,
Irene. Yeah. And no, she came in with a car. We didn't have cars in Delano, but she had a car. She took us on tour, yes, many times.
What were those tours like when you first took the plane on the road?
Oh, rough and ready, man. We used to go to Union halls, churches, up to Stanford, you know, all over, come to L.A., the Unitarian Church here, all up and down the state. And actually, Irene was the one that I could trust with the cash. She became our cash person, right? And so we used to take collections, you know, just spread the hat. And then it would all go to Irene. I knew I could trust her. Yeah, she was beautiful.
Answer.
Congratulations.
Good
I
mom.
loved her, really.
Okay.
Orlando Terrazas, one of the sons from Irene. But I remember when I was a kid seeing when you guys were with the teatro, were with the farm workers. You know, I've seen them. Saw you perform on a flatbed truck. You know, in East LA, in Delano. You know, and then you guys, the teatro left the union and then went on its own. Talk about that transition, about how you made the choice, the decision to become, where you were part of the union, because it was the teatro was really a way to spread the word. That's what it was. But then at that point, you had to make that transition. So talk about what factors came into that decision of breaking away from the union and being your own theater company.
Well, there's a nice story behind it, which will be in my book, okay? That there were tensions, you know, the summer of '67. It was tight, 2 years into the strike, you know, and it was a little tight. But the fact is that we were also embarking on our first national tour, which we did, you know, went all the way to New York and back and to Chicago. And we performed inside the Senate courtyard of the Senate building, sponsored by Bob and Tendy Kennedy, both the senators. And so for their staffs, we performed inside this. I don't know how many theater companies have had that opportunity to perform inside the Senate building, but we did. So it was a great experience. We left, actually, ultimately, because the union struggled. The struggle was deep. It lasted 5 years. And we were trying to develop talent. So I would pick people out of the picket line that I could see they could articulate ideas or talk. And then Caesar would say he'd make a good organizer. We're sending him to Chicago. And I said, whoa, you know. And a number of people did that. And so what we needed to do to be able to exist as a theater company is to withdraw from the strike, but still support the strike. Does that make sense to you? So we moved 60 miles north to Delray, set up a Farm Workers Cultural Center, and continued to work with the United Farm Workers to this day, okay? We're still supporting the union. There have been ups and downs for the last 50 years. But it's still a struggle that needs to be fought because farm workers are not getting justice in the fields. As a matter of fact, they're now being shut out. They're now being humiliated for coming to work in these lousy fields, which is, I mean, that's total ignorance. Well, don't these people, even the growers who voted for Trump, realize now that they may have shot themselves in the foot because they're not getting the work crews, you know? And the fact is that we need an overview here that is more enlightened. But it does start from the ground up. Who's going to pick the food that we're all eating? That's the serious question.
Good answer. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Jill Goldwright from South Pasadena. And I have a performance-based question. I saw the show a couple weeks ago, and I don't want to give too much away, but I'm especially interested in the portrayal of the El Pachuco figure in the second act. Mm-hmm. And I kind of saw him as part everything, right? Part Aztec god, part crucified Christ figure, part anti-hero, part everyman. And I'm wondering, as playwright and director, how you would have audiences read that character by the end of the show.
I think everybody likes the Pachuco, you know. Eddie Olmos was nominated for a Tony in New York. He was the only one that got any praise. You know, the rest of us got, you know. But the fact is that Zoot Suit is epic theater at the same time that it's very symbolic and mythological theater, you know. This symbol is the oldest symbol of movement in the Americas. It's called Nawi Oling, for movement. And it's still, it's the Native American yin-yang. That's what this is, okay? And it speaks to the dynamics of the universe. And I incorporated them in the original production, and we incorporated them again, okay? So the Pachuco is more than just a Zoot Suiter. What are the roots of that? He's Tezcatlipoca, the dean of the School of Hard Knocks in the Aztec pantheon. He is the jaguar. He is night. He is the one that is dangerous in the world. But he's the dean of School of Knocks, Hard Knocks, because you learn about experience. Quetzalcoatl, who is his twin brother, is the learning part, the book learning, the arts. So these are two twins that are still active in America. But I wanted to invoke El Pachuco in his prime colors, black and red. It's got a little blue in it now, but it's in black and red, because that's the power that we're invoking. We're in the age of Tezcatlipoca. We've been trying to get out of Tezcatlipoca for 500 years, okay? Because he's beating us in the ass. He really is, you know? But the fact is that by invoking this, then we push forward into the future. And there's so much to talk about in terms of the levels of Zoot Suit, you know? That is one of the levels, the Aztec symbol. When he gets stripped, I mean, how can you strip an Indian, you know? Right. He goes into his element. Here I am. What are they? You know, you know, and he climbs the pyramid backwards. You know, you know, like Eleanor Powell. You know, with Fred Astaire. You know, she high heels and dancing backwards, right? Well, that's what the campesinos do. Is going up. A lot of people don't realize that those weren't sacrificial centers. 400 cities of stone in the Americas were ceremonial centers aligned with the stars. They used to have productions with 20,000 actors in costume, okay? They outdid the Greeks, but because people are so blissfully ignorant of the Americas, no one knows. They see the ruins in Teotihuacan or Chichen Itza, or all the way down to Monte Alban and on into Guatemala, but they don't know what they were like, you know? When Peter Brook came to San Juan, we shared some stories. And I was telling him that America was in theater. I mean, we were theatricalized. We were a theater culture with dance and drama and symbolism. And then he said to me, do you know what India means? The name India, from India. It means actor. And that's a very theatrical culture as well. So, you know, we need to open our eyes as to what's before our very eyes. If farm workers come to work as beasts of burden, the objective of the Teatro Campesino from the beginning was to denounce the brutalization of human spirits in the fields. We wanted to be able to uplift that spirit directly by going to the farm workers and giving them an opportunity to sing and dance, you know. But that's something that pertains to all human beings. All our spirits get drained of their energy, and we must have a society that continues to heighten and enlighten and celebrate that aspect of our humanity. That's why we have theaters. That's why we will always need theaters, okay?
Pues, buenas noches, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias por lo que ha platicado. Realmente para algunos de nosotros que nacimos y crecimos en México, ver, por ejemplo, el documental o la película Zoot Suit, fue una revelación de que había una lucha también de nuestro pueblo mexicano, ¿verdad? Hay una lucha constante. Escuchando a la señora Rosa ahorita que mencionaba de cómo el movimiento del Zoot Suit hizo que nuestro pueblo levantara la cabeza, me recordaba el movimiento zapatista también, las compañeras indígenas que con sus armas en su momento también levantaron la cabeza y están de frente pues a la historia. Mi pregunta sería, en este momento, ¿el movimiento chicano sigue pugnando, sigue trabajando, sigue luchando por, digamos, los derechos humanos de nuestro pueblo? ¿Hasta dónde ha cambiado? ¿Ustedes han percibido que ha cambiado, por ejemplo, la propuesta del movimiento chicano cuando a ustedes les tocó estar en ese momento relacionado al día de hoy. Muchísimas gracias y gracias por todo lo que han hecho.
Gracias,
en cultura.
hermano. No, en una palabra, yo creo que el movimiento chicano se ha profundizado. He's asking how has the Chicano movement impacted on today, and I'm saying it's just gotten more profound. We don't insist so much on calling ourselves Chicanos because there are other Latinos and we embrace that. I don't like Hispanic, quite frankly. That's colonial, you know. That's colonialism. And so I tell you a term that I really love, American. I'm an American. If I have, after 30,000 years, if some of us are not Americans, what the hell are we? You know, we've been here a long, long time. And I realized that that thing that happened 500 years ago, called the discovery of America and the so-called conquest of Mexico, you know, 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas died. Not because of Spanish swords, but because of smallpox. So consider in 1350, they had the Black Plague in Europe. It took centuries for Europe to find its feet again because of the Black Plague. 75 million people died in the Black Plague. They don't know how many people died in the Americas because of smallpox. Around 75, maybe more. 90% of the Native Americans died. They couldn't, within a single lifetime, they couldn't resist. So all of us that look like this, in our Chicanos or mixed groups, we're survivors. We're survivors. We carry now the resistance to smallpox that the rest of the world had. But it doesn't mean that the world was empty. It means that a lot was lost. The Spanish, my Spanish ancestors, unfortunately, were royal assholes. You know, they burned the codexes, you know, of my ancestors. So now we have to recapture that, you know, slowly but surely. But what's before us now is a real discovery of America, the Renaissance. But it includes everybody. We can't deny the Asian presence. I've grown up with Asians all my life. I love Asia. I love the Asian cultures. There's no denying Europe. I love Europe. I've been to Europe many, many times. A wonderful place. I love the Middle East. You know, the big fear now is about Arabs and Muslims. The first martyr of the United Farm Workers struggle in Delano was Najib Daifullah, a Yemeni farm worker who gave his life in the struggle. And then there was a Jewish, I mean, there were so many different people that have been martyred. So it's not a question of race. It's a question of justice. It's a question of humanity.
Josefina Lopez here again. This question is for Rose Portillo. Rose, most Latinas get to play stereotypes. You've been very fortunate that you've played many wonderful roles. What role do you wish someone would write for you? That you go, wow, why hasn't anybody thought of this for a Latina? What role would that be? And then also, what else would you want Latino men, but also male screenwriters and playwrights to know about women so they could write better roles for women?
I feel in a fortunate moment. I spent a lot of my career saying no. And so there's a reason that I sort of disappeared. And I took the time to stay in the audition room and go inside and tell the producers why I was not going to audition for this part. And then I got tired. And I decided it was somebody else's turn. And I made theater. I made a lot of theater with Teresa Chavez and about productions. And created roles that I wanted to play. From Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz to Joan of Arc to a dance teacher from California. And I guess it goes back to, I have yet, though, I have to say, I have actually yet to play someone like me. Mira, aquí estoy. Yeah? I'm wearing red tennis shoes. I got striped socks. I like my Native American earrings because I am part Native American. I might wear my rebosos. I don't like that I have to take this shit off. Oh, I did it. God damn. I was so good this whole interview process. I was so good. I don't, it is a wonderful, I teach acting and I teach social justice. I teach acting through the lens of social justice. And what I always say is we are learning to walk in other people's shoes. Yes? So it is wonderful to exercise that muscle. I don't look like Dolores Reina. I don't. I don't live like Dolores Reina. But I love that woman, and she lives inside of me, and I can bring her out here. Yeah? So there are times when I really love the putting on, but I don't always want to have to do that. I want to be able to reveal, and to reveal women like me, women like Josefina, women like Teresa Chavez, women who fill Pomona College, from students to professors, who, you know, we're quirky, we're complicated, we're eccentric, we're a fabric. Yeah, it's still missing. We're not even close. So, hombres, listen. Gente, listen.
Rose, let me tap on that because it's something I wanted to say. There are many people that were behind the Sleepy Lagoon case. And it was one play. It was impossible for me to deal with all of them. The story would have gone in different directions. I went with Alice McGrath because I met Alice. But there were other people that were fundamentally instrumental in creating the Sleepy Lagoon defense. Josefina Fierro de Bright. She married John Bright, a Hollywood director. Josefina Fierro was a dynamic force in Los Angeles in the 1940s. Josefina Fierro de Bright. Rue McCormick, tremendous organizer. Again, you may not know these names, you know. Luisa Moreno, who was one of the heads of the Yucapawa Union here, fighting to industrialize the canneries. Emma Temayuca. These are Latinas that have worked in the Southwest in that period and were very instrumental in making changes. And a few men, too. Bert Corona. Bert saw the original production. He wasn't happy. He wasn't included in the cast, you know. But Bert was a character here and one of the defenders, again, of the Chicano voice in his time. So I pay homage to all of those people, and I honor them, you know, for having paved the way for the rest of us that came after them, because they were warriors and they were true Americans.
I want to thank everybody for coming out for this amazing evening. On behalf of the Center Theater Group and KPCC, thank you for your presence. And more important, I want to thank our great panel, Tomás, Rose, Michael. And most especially, Luis Valdez.
You did. I want to ask you, did I ever meet Henry Reina? Remember?
Yeah, it's the last question.
Let me close this one, because no, Hank Reina, I never met Hank Reina. He was gone by the time I met him. He died in 1972. But I'll share this little anecdote with you. There we are in New York, getting ready to open at the Winter Garden, okay, where My Fair Lady premiered. The Beatlemania had been before us. For a Chicano from California who started among farm workers, this was a dream. Incredible dream. But the one thing that I found myself thinking about was Hank Leyva, that he couldn't be there. So I went to sleep the night before opening night, and I had a dream. And I dreamt that I went to this prison, and that everybody that were visitors that were at that prison were living, and all the inmates were dead. And so they put me on a little window in the visitor section, and then I saw a door open way over there, and a guard opened up, and out came Hank Leyvas, as I had known him in the photographs, but he was alive. He came and sat down next to me, and he stared directly in my eyes, and I was a little intimidated. You know, what is this guy gonna say? And then suddenly he smiled, and he said, "I like what you did with my play." And that was my review in New York City.
There you go. Luis Valdez, thank you all very much.